Say, Will.
Yeah?
That was the first one.
First one what?
First one I ever killed.
Yeah?
You know how I said I shot 5?
Well, you sure killed the hell out of that today.
Hell yeah. I killed the hell out of him, didn't I?
It's a hell of a thing, killing. You take away all he's got, and all he's ever gonna have.
What up, meatheads? This is Travis, American Butcher, and this is the Meat Block Podcast. This is the weekly podcast where David, Ryan, and myself go deep into a topic, or not so deep, and just talk about stories and topics in the meat industry and how it relates to our lives. Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes we're all together. Who knows? But this week, it's all about killing. Our first kills. What was going through our head, if anything? Was it a watershed moment in our lives on the subject of dispatching an animal? Now, in certain groups, I will call it harvesting. In certain groups, I will call it dispatch. And amongst other butchers, and usually that means David, I'll refer to it as shooting an animal in its fucking face. I did not start out so cavalier with the language and my feelings about it. I view it as a tool and a necessity, something that is unromanticized, but at one point was heavily thought about. In my early days, it used to keep me up at night. It used to stress me out. The stress of killing USDA would give me the runs. I hated knocking, because I have seen the consequences of a bad knock. And the consequences means that there is possibly prolonged suffering. But if you have a missed knock, and the USDA happens to be there, they have the ability to shut you down and write you an NR. And it's not like a normal shutdown where you could later start in a few hours. You won't be able to start until you have responded to that NR, and usually a vet or two and the frontline supervisor come out to approve your program. You are still able to cut, but you're not able to run your kill floor. This means that you and possibly your entire floor will be either cleaning the plant or at home. The first knock I did was on my first day ever in the industry. With no training, with just someone marking on the animal's forehead with the blood of the previous animal where to shoot it. But I'll get back to that story later in the show. Here's Ryan.
Good cutting enhances the quality of good meat. In his way, the meat cutter is an artist. Poor cutting results in an inferior piece of meat, regardless of quality.
It's hard to put my finger on my first kill, seeing as I've been dabbling in killing critters for quite some time. I killed a lot of smaller animals, like crustaceans, fish, chickens, and turkeys, before recently progressing to pigs, sheep, and cows. It was around the time I was employed on lobster boats, hauling up lobster pots, that I really began to reflect on what it means to be a death bringer, and I began to consider how I felt about being in that role. What's with all this killing shit, Ryan? I didn't grow up hunting. I had never set foot on a farm. I'd had a meditation habit since I was 17, within which I'd plunged fairly deep into Theravada Buddhism. Buddhist meditation practice so powerfully caught my interest that I strongly considered pursuing the life of a monk. Yet my underlying questions about what it means to be human propelled me off the meditation cushion and into the elements, into the sensory world of human food-gathering vocations, namely fishing, farming, and butchering. Many branches of Buddhism discuss the importance of not killing humans or animals, and there are often correlations made between vegetarianism and a more peaceful, ethical life. I reflected on this as I learned to smash crab after rock crab that came up in our lobster traps, and I reflected on this as we harvested innumerable lobsters each day and sold them to middlemen, who then turned around and sold them to grocers, processors, and consumers. By that time, I had done a 3-month stint in the high Himalayas and had interacted with an ancient version of Buddhist culture there. And those Buddhist communities hunted and ate meat as an essential aspect of their culture and life way. Rice and beans were a symbol of the encroachment of lowland industry and government upon a previously isolated region. For millennia, these communities had followed and hunted wild game across the tundra and had kept livestock in the agricultural valleys. Partly outcropping from this, I wasn't wholly convinced that things were as simple as vegetarian rhetoric often implies. Gradually, I developed a perspective on killing and eating meat that, in practice, feels very similar to my experience of parenting. I've got 3 little kids under the age of 6. Oftentimes in parenting, we have to take strong action for the good of the kids or the good of the whole family. But amidst this, our children may not cognitively be able to understand the larger purpose of the action we're taking. They may think we are being mean or strict or unfair. I'm referring to limit setting and boundary setting for our children. This is essential. This is very good for them. They benefit from having boundaries, even though they will often fight those boundaries tooth and nail. It is in their nature to continually be testing and gathering information about the boundaries of their world. A mature parent empathizes, but is able to be consistent and keep their eye on the prize. It is this managerial mindset that keeps the good of the individual in view and also, importantly, keeps the good of the whole in view. Herds of herbivores, whether farmed or wild, need predator pressure to ensure the health and integrity of the whole herd. This is without dispute. Harvesting, pruning, and culling is of utmost value when applied in the right dose and at the right time. Without predation, a species will either deplete their food source, overpopulate, and starve, as in the case of herbivores, or will disrupt and denude whole ecosystems, as in the case of omnivorous wild hogs and, frankly, modern humans. So if strategic killing and culling of animals actually helps the whole herd and makes the whole ecosystem healthier, then someone has to pull up their britches and be the killer, be the death bringer. It's never easy or enjoyable to see a stressed animal, nor an animal that's suffering due to sickness. But there is a certain peacefulness, a certain mature mindset that comes from a strategic and timely dispatch. There's a peacefulness that comes from knowing I didn't dodge the issue, I faced it. I didn't rig this animal up to expensive life support equipment. It was time for this animal to die, and I performed this service for the animal. I could only hope that the universe provides me also with such a clean, finite, and tidy death when my time comes. A quick knock to the head for an animal that had spent its life ruminating with its herd on clean pastures is really quite a nice death as compared to many other possible outcomes. From crustaceans, I moved on to poultry. Killing chickens felt more serious than killing crabs because they're louder, bloodier, and flopped around quite a bit more. I was an apprentice on the livestock crew at Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture in New York. There were many remarkable land stewards and farmers there that I enjoyed the company of. At that time, we raised pigs, sheep, chickens, turkeys, geese, and bees, but the poultry were the only animals we processed on site. Once a week during the growing season, we'd grab 100 of our 6-week-old chubby meat birds from the field, crate them, stack them on the back of a Kubota, and drive them to our small state-inspected poultry processing facility. I remember sweating and gritting my teeth with anxiety when I sawed those first jugular veins. You're not supposed to saw. It's supposed to be a quick plunge into the neck and then a quick slice on either side of the neck with a sharp knife, severing both large arteries. The bird's upside down in a funnel-shaped cone, and by severing these arteries in this way, the bird's heart will then pump all the blood out of the bird's system. Death by exsanguination is what that's called. The livestock crew member who was teaching me was a girl. To be more specific, she was a babe. Killing chickens? No big deal. I do this all the time. You know. Blood spraying everywhere as the 6 chickens in the cones on the wall spasmed, gradually unwinding towards death. She'd been on the farm a year longer than me and was the designated killer on poultry processing day. She was full of piss and vinegar, smart as a whip, and an extremely capable farm worker. She would do this thing that always perplexed me. She wouldn't really clean her face as she was killing chickens, and the blood spray and splatter would build up on her forehead and cheeks. Then after it was over, she'd walk around the very public farm we worked on and chat people up while covered in dried blood spray. By the time, years later, when I arrived at a farm site in a USDA mobile truck and was allowed to bleed out my first beef, or the time I was helping Travis and he let me shoot my first sheep with a .22, I already had spent many years coming to grips with my place in the circle of life. My perspective will certainly continue to evolve and become more refined with time, but as of right now, it goes something like this. There's no avoidance of death and killing. We are all implicit in killing, whether we are consciously aware of it or not. There's something seriously wrong with senseless, purposeless killing, but there's nothing wrong with big picture, purposeful killing. Killing is merely a fact of life on this planet. Our suburbs, our plowing and agriculture, and our poor land management decisions cause incredible fallout and harm to many animal species, large and small. Plants need animals to graze and browse them and cut them back. Animal populations within an ecosystem need to be kept in balance, and animals' bodies need to die and decay on the landscape to feed the microbes that make up our soils, which in turn feed the plants that grow from these soils. Lear Keith, Lierre, last name Keith, is a formerly vegan author who writes on a variety of subjects, including the series of events that changed her mind about meat eating. In giving accolades to her book, another author describes Keith's journey in this way, quote, adult knowledge dawned in her that predators and prey could apply equally to all life forms, depending on when. All life forms fit into a circle of producers, consumers, and degraders. We all need to eat, and in the end, we all need to be eaten, end quote. This next section is written by Lear Keith. Here she talks about the gradual unraveling of the moral high ground that she had previously inhabited as a vegan. Quote, what does the soil want to eat? Well, it wants manure, and it wants urine, and it wants blood meal and bone meal. And I could not face that. I wanted my garden to be pure and death-free. It didn't matter what I wanted. Plants wanted those things. They needed those things to grow, end quote. Another quote by Keith, Lear Keith, quote, life is literally a process of one creature eating another, whether it's bacteria breaking down plants and animals, plants strangling each other, animals going for the throat, or viruses attacking animals. All of nature is a conjugation of the verb to eat, in the words of William Ralph Ing. Last quote by Lear Keith. There's no place left for the buffalo to roam. There's only corn, wheat, and soy. About the only animals that escape the biotic cleansing of the agriculturalists are small animals like mice and rabbits, and billions of them are killed by the harvesting equipment every year. Unless you're out there with a scythe, don't forget to add them to the death toll of your vegetarian meal. They count, and they died for your dinner along with all the animals that have dwindled past the point of genetic feasibility. End quote.
Ryan touches on the cycle of life. And one thing, doing my job, I've become painfully aware of my mortality and everyone's mortality. That there's only one thing in life that is certain, and that is that it will end. And I'm not trying to bum anyone out, but it's true. Everything that is alive will cease to be one day. Time is a straight line, as of now, and it only goes in one direction. And as we rock with the ebbs and flows in time, we will eventually return to the earth. The tallest trees will eventually fall down or burn. The last few months have been hell on my hometown of Santa Barbara, California. And when I mean my hometown, I mean in the literal sense that I did not grow up around Santa Barbara. My alma mater high school is Santa Barbara High. So as I was watching the Thomas Fire ravage the hillside, encroach from the suburb of Montecito, and move in closer to my hometown, I have never felt so helpless, in the sense of watching it from far away, and seeing the fire get closer to exits and streets that I knew. Now, knowing if I still lived there, I wouldn't be able to do one thing or the other, and my personal appearance wouldn't sway the fire to leave, I still felt helpless and far away. So I was relieved when the fire stopped and was put out and controlled. I remember 8 years earlier, the tea fire started on my 25th birthday, and I was out drinking downtown with friends. We look up into the hillside, and at the same time, I get a text from my friend Gabe, who says, "The hill's on fire." Power went out, but me and my friends continued to drink downtown as we met up with other people who were displaced by the evacuation order. That night, about 10 friends stayed and slept on my living room floor as they were evacuated. On November 13th, 2008, the firefighters were able to hold the fire line through the night. The next day, my friend Scott and I drove to his house to grab everything of value and importance that would fit in the bed of my pickup. We could see the flames. We could feel the heat from the Santa Ana winds. A plane flew overhead, and we could taste the red shit that they dropped on the flames and feel the mist against our skin. Police cruisers were navigating the windy roads on their bullhorns, saying immediate evacuation. We loaded up the truck and then went back into the downtown Santa Barbara area, where we watched the fire consume the Riviera. Over 200 homes were lost that day. Friends that I knew were now homeless, and the cleanup and the displacement affected the town for months and years afterward. So flash forward to this last November, and you could imagine my relief when the Thomas Fire spared Santa Barbara and Montecito. January 9th, 2018, there was an unusually hard rain that hit the central coast of California, and the freshly burned areas loosened up, and the ground became liquefied, and the hillside fell into the city. And over 20 people lost their lives. If you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with this episode or this topic? Not that much. I just kind of wanted to get it off my chest. But yet, those trees, that forest, that vegetation, died. It burned. Some California native plants can't reproduce without fire. The germinating process won't start without heat. The Santa Ana winds were there before us, and they'll be there after. And Earth and nature is going to do what it does, regardless if we're around or not. Which is the reason I felt small, the reason I felt helpless. This next piece is by David.
Hey gang, I was recently on a trip to Washington, so I was cooking for a friend's wedding. It was great. Most of my friends live out in Washington. This particular weekend was all about celebrating with a couple of favorite people whom I met in a small craft butchery shop in Seattle that I used to work in. While I was out there, another good friend who farmed sheep, who I've spoken of before, got a hold of me, and I was going to help him be an extra set of hands while turning in his rams for breeding season. He also owns his own small inspected facility, so that he can slaughter his own crop and get the USDA stamp on it. We got to talking about HACCP projects and ideas and wishes and wants and all that stuff, possibilities, within the HACCP system. And I realized I'd be in town for one of his harvest days, and I asked if I could join. Sure, he said. It'd be 6 to 8 lambs that day, which on a normal day at my normal job would probably be 75 to 90 minutes of work, which would more or less be no big deal. This was kind of special, however, because my friend's small facility is where I got my start in killing. And I've honestly enjoyed slaughter since my first day on the job. And while I know that killing is a young man's game, I plan to thoroughly enjoy the work until I'm no longer a young man. And age is all your mindset, I guess. I figured it'd be fun to revisit this place, after a period of time not working there. I've been working on my skills elsewhere for quite a while, so, I thought it'd be good to visit and see what kind of hand I was now after, a few years. People ask me all the time, what do you like about cutting meat? And honestly, I don't really know. I mean, I can think of a few things. It's methodical. There's always something new to learn. You're never as good as somebody else in the room or somebody else at another facility. Deals with quantifiable values. There's some marketing involved. There's lots of things that I like, I kind of feel the same for slaughter. Different reasons, but I feel the same. I'm not sure what it is that I like. Getting to kill 1 to 2 days a week at my plant and then cut 3 to 4 days a week is actually totally ideal for me. I know that not everybody's lucky enough to have that situation, and it's not for everybody, but I really love it, because by the time I get a full day's work in the kill floor, I'm ready to get back in the cut room, and by the time the next kill day comes around, I'm over being in the cut room and I'm ready to get on the kill floor again. I don't know what it is, but I've liked it since the beginning. Before I had knocked my first animal, however, I was working multiple jobs in Seattle. I was at a small craft butcher shop, as I mentioned, cutting whole animals, mostly local hogs and beef from the place Travis was running at the time. I did this full time, for peanuts, and another 20 to 30 hours I worked in the basement of a Sicilian restaurant where I milled whole grains into flour and made pasta, bread, desserts, and all that stuff. I'd work the occasional brunch shift, because I'm a true glutton for punishment. I've been at this restaurant for about 3 years at this point, and was feeling super stale and kind of jaded. And I had been at the butcher shop for about 6 months and was already burning out there. There were 5 to 6 of us running the super small shop. It was only open 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. We received a half a beef every other week, as well as 2 lamb per week. I think 3 hogs, and then some, a bunch of boxed premium cuts, for the tech bros that came in and wanted filet every day. There wasn't much cutting to go around, and although we were constantly overstaffed, looking back, I could cut the entire week's docket of animals myself now in about 3.5 hours. I never left the city at that time. I was living half a block from the meat shop in the busiest neighborhood in the city. I was just feeling really stir crazy and kind of pent up at the time, and was really looking for something new, but no opportunities were coming my way, and another restaurant didn't sound good. And there weren't really any other butcher shops at the time unless I wanted to work in Pike's Place Market. And, I think we've all heard horror stories about the butcher that used to be down there. One day I got a text from the executive chef from the restaurant that I worked at. He had an opportunity that he thought I'd enjoy. The farmer from whom we purchased certified organic grass-fed lamb, was looking for an extra set of hands in his small processing facility. It wasn't really so much processing; it was just a kill facility because he mostly dealt in whole carcass. But it was USDA inspected, and there was he said, no experience necessary, which was cool and kind of rare. So I just had to find my own ride and show up with, overalls, like waterproof overalls and some muck boots. Start time was 6:30, and, as the crow flies, it probably would have been 35 to 40 minutes to get there. But with the traffic and I had to take 2 or 3 buses to get there, it took about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it was the first bus of the day out of Seattle, which seemed daunting, but I don't know. Something pushed me to this. It sounded intriguing. I was looking forward to the bus ride, honestly, getting out of town. And it just happened to be on my day off on Thursday. So I decided the next day I went out and got some bibs from Goodwill and some muck boots and was ready for the next week's harvest day. And that day came up. I hopped on the first bus out of Seattle. It left at 4:15 a.m. I had a couple hours of car talk episodes or something saved up for the bus ride. I think I slept most of the way. And the bus dropped me about 1.5 miles from the farm. On the way there, I specifically remember there being a Starbucks in a strip mall that I passed, and I went in there and stuffed my face with 4 or 5 donuts and had some sort of frappe latte thing. I think out of maybe nervous eating or something. I tend to do that sometimes. I'm not sure what that's about. I arrived just in time to meet the farmer before he started doing pre-op on the site for the inspector. I had no idea what HACCP plans were at the time, or pre-op or anything like that. And aside from me and the farmer, there was in attendance this guy that I recognized. He was an executive chef from a popular Seattle restaurant. I guess he was just kind of a friend of the farmer, was just helping out. And this super tall, middle-aged fellow named Craig Taleggio. He used to own a slaughter facility up the road for many years. Their specialty was bob veal, so this guy could really skin out a lamb quickly. That's what we were going to be slaughtering that day. He was 6'5" while hunching, I think. I mean, the guy's super tall. He was the one that was going to be training me on the slaughter process. He only had one knife in his scabbard, an old wood-handled Dexter beef skinner. Had a snake coiled up on the handle, looked like it was kind of burned into it or something. Told me to wait until pre-op was done, which was explained to me as the prerequisite checklist to complete before the site can be considered ready and in compliance, according to the USDA, before a slaughter. So my job was going to be pretty simple. All the animals to be slaughtered that morning were loaded onto a livestock trailer. One at a time, the animal was led up by the farmer from the back door, past a little, blind, right to the back door, which was open about 12 inches. And then the ewe would kind of naturally stick her head out. The first day was cull ewes, I remember. She'd stick her head out through the foot or so opening. I'd hold her chin up, and the farmer would stun it by shooting it in a specific spot on its skull, which I, wasn't privy to that knowledge at that point, with a cash special, the pistol-gripped captive bolt device. He'd then flip the sheep out onto the ground, end over end. I'd grab its hind leg before it started kicking and drag it about 4 feet to a winch, hoist it up over a trough, and stick the jugular. And then the trough would catch all the blood. This guy had really prepared a great setup, so no waste touched the ground and stayed in compliance. The first time, it felt, natural and easy. And I was pretty excited. My heart was beating, but I took it seriously and did a good job off the bat. Next, Craig showed me how to open the shanks so as to skin it just enough to transfer it to a gambrel. At this point, I had never even heard of skinning cradle, So to this day, dressing a sheep hanging on a rail feels a lot more natural to me than anything else. Next, I was shown how to open the hide down the center, and then how to skin the flanks just enough to be able to punch the hide out. Once I had learned bunging and had the hide down to the neck, I was taught about finding the atlas joint, which I still, to this day, think is kind of fun on a real big hog or a big bull trying to get in there quickly. And then I was on to the gutting. I was, as most are, when you start this thing, nervous about this part. In fact, the first one I had eviscerated myself, I spilled a whole gut full of liquid baleage inside the carcass, which honestly got me over my fear of busting the gut very quickly. And with Craig being a consummate pro and perfectionist and a great teacher, it didn't take me too long to get the hang of the process. Although I would say in my first 3 or 4 weeks, I probably had more trimming work than the rest of my career combined, honestly. Partially that had to do with the fact that, a lot of these animals were taken, they were rotationally grazed, they were brought to the kill site, and then immediately, because it was a change in grass, got diarrhea. So some of them were like super challenging off the bat. After the slaughter day was done, we took the viscera, the fleeces, and all of the collected blood up the road to an organic farming education center where they were super happy about the nitrogen components for their hot compost piles. The following week, when I came back to drop off the next load, the piles from the previous week were over 150 degrees Fahrenheit in the center, and I found that to be super interesting right off the bat. After we, had cleaned up the site, I realized I had forgotten a change of clothes on my first day. So on the way to the bus, I grabbed a nasty sub sandwich and hopped on the transit back to Seattle. But at this point, it was during rush hour. It was probably about 2.5 hours. The funny thing is, this afternoon route went directly through Microsoft's main campus. This day, and every Thursday after that for about 4 months, I thoroughly enjoyed sitting on a public transit bus full of Seattle's best and brightest, dressed to the nines, all of them, with me in my post-slaughter coveralls, stinking like nasty hell, eating a nasty sandwich, feeling satisfied, after a hard morning's work. Those were my favorite days that year, going out to the farm and slaughtering lamb. And I know that not everybody's so lucky to have an introduction that way and something as interesting with great teachers and great people to work with. But I think it really benefited me not going directly into a slaughter factory job out of necessity. I feel very fortunate for that reason. And, I suggest it for anybody that wants to get into slaughter. I don't think I'd spend my money on one of those like hog butchering sort of retreats or something like that. I think I would just try to get a job as a hand with a custom farm killer to learn the trade. That's going to be a lot more legitimate and you're going to get a lot better information. So I know Travis and Ryan and I are all super interested in hearing other people's first day on the slaughter job stories. So hit us up on Instagram and share them with us, or even on the Facebook group.
In 2008, after the economy took a dive and the recession hit, I found myself in need of employment. I was a journeyman tile setter before, working in Montecito and Santa Barbara. People were no longer renovating their bathrooms. I came face to face with the reality that I could no longer afford to live in my hometown. At this time, my brother was wearing me down for the last several weeks and trying to get me to move to Vermont to work in the slaughterhouse he was. I was a vegetarian at the time and didn't think this would be the best. Now, I wasn't a vegetarian for ethical reasons. I was a vegetarian because I grew up in the hardcore, straight-edge punk scene, and it was more just something to do to fit in. Years prior, I lost the edge, but kept the veg. Being faced with the stark reality that I was running out of money, I decided to move. I left beautiful Santa Barbara. In October, the temperature was probably 77 degrees, and there was probably a warm offshore wind. I packed everything I owned into 2 duffel bags, got on a plane, sat next to a heavy-set Samoan guy who offered to share his sushi with me. It was the red-eye. I arrived at 4 a.m. After touching down in Boston, it was a 2.5-hour drive to get to where I'd be working. And yes, I worked that first day. Luckily, my brother picked me up, and I slept all the way to the processing. I was given a pair of boots that were 2 sizes too big and said, "Here, this person doesn't work here." Given a scabber and given 3 knives, a 6-inch straight boning knife, a small paring poultry knife, and a lamb skinner. The owner of the company said, "Those are the only knives I'll ever give you. If you need more, you find them." There were holes in my boots. My socks were pink by the end of the day. With my new brown apron, my boots, and new knives, I walked onto the kill floor. What I remember vividly is not the sights. It was the humidity. It was the air. It was how everything was loud. Then I started seeing the red concrete floor with blood mixed in, and water, and little pieces of fat. It was loud. There were Jarvis air knives going. There was a radio playing 80s songs, and every once in a while I'd hear this giant shot. Pop. There was air assist equipment everywhere. Drop spreaders going up and down. Air knives. Landers. And it was the first time I really heard a New England accent. All my senses were being attacked at once. A gentleman named Corey, who sounded like he was straight out of The Departed, approached me and said, "Your brother tells me you're a vegetarian. Is that true?" "Yes." "Well, here." And he hands me a captive bolt. He walks me over to a knockbox and says, "Shoot that fucking beef." I said, "You want me to shoot that cow?" He said, "No, retard. I want you to shoot the fucking beef. It's got a dick, doesn't it?" He dipped his finger in blood that was on the ground and made a mark on the beef's forehead. At this point, it's quiet. Everyone stopped working. No machines are going, and everyone's staring at me. The USDA is even there and said, "Well, are you going to shoot it?" I asked, "What do I do after I shoot it?" Corey said, "You just shoot it. I'll do the rest." And I walked up onto the knockbox, and he hands me a captive bolt. He tells me it's cocked. Don't shoot myself, and make sure the animal dies on the first shot, unless I want to have tomorrow off. He corrected my angle. I thought he was going to say, "I'm just fucking with you," and take the captive bolt back. He never did. Less than a minute into the industry, and I killed my first beef. The room sprung to life with excitement. Everyone cheered. The knockbox lifted up, and the beef fell dead on the floor. Within seconds, Corey had his back leg shackled and sliced both jugular veins, and did an aorta stick. He said, "Inspector, do you have those vials I need for your sample?" She handed him 6 blood vials. He filled them up with blood from the aorta stick, and then all the cheering ceased. He handed me one. He handed one to my brother, and continued until they were all passed out, and said, "Drink up." He says it's tradition for everyone to take a shot of blood on someone's first kill. I looked around with nervous anticipation for someone to again say, "Just kidding." Peer pressure never affected me in high school. I was never bullied, but I also knew there was no turning back, and I wanted to be accepted by this group of people. I looked at my brother, and he nodded his head. I looked at the blood vial in my hands, and thought about how 24 hours ago I was in sunny Santa Barbara, California. And now I was in rural southern Vermont with 2 feet of snow on the ground. Put the vial in my mouth, whipped my head back, and swallowed. I certainly was no longer a vegetarian. The USDA inspector said, "You guys are gross," and went back into her office. And then everyone went back to work. And since that first knock, I estimated that I have done north of 60,000. And I still train people by making a spot on the forehead with the blood of the previously fallen beef. I have never made anyone drink it. If my amazing storytelling didn't paint the perfect picture of what it was like to work on a kill floor, with the sounds and the colorful cast of characters. Here are some audio I took from a video I filmed during that period. You will hear 3 distinct knocks, you will hear 3 distinct bleeds, and you will hear some amazing music and accents, as well as my self-conscious dumb laugh.
Good. Good.
Now on the cows, you go behind that thing, like the pigs. Remember how we were doing?
Yeah, on the pigs you go on the top tendon of the hoof. Doesn't really matter, but you have to go behind that knuckle on the cow.
No, that's that other thing. It just slip off.
Yeah.
And then it comes all the way off the foot. Did you shoot him in my bullet wound? Look. Yeah.
I think the best part's the music.
Well, they blew up Chicken Man in Philly last night. Now they blew up his house too. Down on the boardwalk, they're getting ready for a fight. Gonna see what them racket boys can do. Now there's trouble busting in from out of state, and the DA can't get no relief. Gonna be
All right, meatheads, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Meat Block Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helped shed some insight about what's going through our head when we're processing or killing. And if you liked what you heard, make sure you subscribe. And if you think other people will like what we said, then please recommend us on social media. And if you want to get a hold of us, you could email us, themeatblockpodcast@gmail.com, tweet us at themeatblockpod, or Instagram, themeatblock. And if you want to join our discussion and online community, please search the Meat Block page on Facebook, because there's a lot of great conversation happening over there. And if you want to get a hold of Ryan, he is at Gather and Break on Instagram. David is at A Farm Butcher on Instagram. And I am at American Butcher on Instagram and Facebook. Again, the one with me standing on a gate. And if you're looking for ways to support the show, the best way to do that is open up your podcast directory, type in the Meat Block, and please leave a comment in a 5-star review. It's that simple. Just a review a day could keep this podcaster from starving. Anyway, enough with my dad jokes. Another great way to support us is tag us on social media or use the hashtag #TheMeatBlock. Our intro was Ring the Bell, and our outro is Hank Williams' Atlantic City. And I think this song is perfect as an outro as it discusses mortality. Remember, keep your knives sharp and live in the margin.
Now our luck may have died, and our love may be cold, but with you forever I'll stay. We're going out where the sand's turning to gold, so put on your stockings, baby, it's getting cold. And everything dies, baby, that's a fact. But maybe everything that dies someday comes back. Put your hair up nice and say